I am having an allergy attack. Excuse me. I can't. As well as some issues with my hairy armpits, which is why I'm wearing long sleeves. But when it comes to removing the hair from my axillary area, we need to speak about the different methods that are available for me to use at home. Specifically, what is the difference between shaving versus waxing versus at-home IPL? All of these can be used to remove hair from the body at home. Some I do recommend professionally, but we're gonna talk about all of that by using the analogy of a lawn. Yes, one of those things that unfortunately, if you live in California, is probably dead because of the drought, or flooded because of the torrential rains and downpours. Love global warming. When it comes to hair, we could have it in the axillary or armpit areas, we could have it on our legs, in our groin or bikini area, or yes, sometimes even on the arms and on the face. When you think of your hair anywhere on your body, you might notice that some hair is coarse and thick, and some is called vellus hair, or basically baby hair that's fine and thin. This baby hair is all over our entire bodies, except for the palms of our hands, the soles of our feet, and our mucous membranes, such as our mouth and the insides of our nose. When it comes to shaving and waxing and IPL, we're normally talking about those thick, coarse hairs. We're talking about the ones that are wiry or have texture or have a color contrast difference when compared to the skin. When you think about your skin, I want you to think of it as like a lawn. For example, here is a cross-section diagram of your skin. What you see here is on the top, the outer layer of the skin called the stratum corneum, as well as these hairs poking through. But as you can see, these hairs actually go deep down. If you struggle with acne, you know that this is where the acne bacteria hides, but this is actually where hairs are created. They get blood flow from down here, and using the papilla, they actually nourish and grow a hair. And yes, there is an oil gland right here that secretes oil where acne bacteria normally flourishes and can cause pimples. But that oil is also really helpful in hair growth because it lubricates this hair shaft and allows this hair to poke up through the skin and give us the hair that's on our bodies. Now, hair is not a bad thing. It is biologically normal. We don't have to get it removed. But if you want to, because of comfort, because of aesthetics, or because of anything else, there are some options available to you. If you kind of look at these hairs growing out the top of the skin, they kind of look like blades of grass, right? And similarly to the skin, blades of grass grow from underneath the ground or underneath the skin. They have roots, kind of like some of the veins and the capillaries down here where they get nourished, and then they poke through the skin to see the sun, which, yes, some areas of our body hair also get to do, except for my armpits, which are not on display today. Now, one of the most common methods of hair removal is shaving, and this is one of the oldest as well. Men for centuries have been shaving or braiding or trimming or grooming their facial hair, such as their beards. And barbershops actually came into the picture around 6,000 years ago in Egypt, where people used to go to other professionals to get their body hair or facial hair groomed or even molded and shaped with beeswax. Greek men would also go to barbershops, but more recently, barbershops were actually a place that were kind of morbid. The reason that they have those stripes on there was because barbershops used to be de facto dentists or surgery clinics. This happened during the Middle Ages when things like leeches were applied to the skin or cupping was used to heal the body. And barbershops didn't really become what we know them as modern day until around the 19th century. Barbershops were actually crucial to African American culture and economy, especially in the United States, when people used to go to not only trim their beards or get their hair cut, but to do styling or to catch up with friends. And especially in the 20th century and beyond, barbershops now service men and sometimes even women with things like facial shaving, otherwise known as dermaplaning. Now, with this history and this accessibility in mind, it's no wonder that shaving is really a go-to for many people. There are many different ways to shave, most of which started on the face and weren't really available to women until the post-war era. You see, there were many different razors at the time, but Gillette was a very popular brand. And most razors look a little bit more like this bevel one. This is a safety razor that actually has replaceable blades. These are much more indicative of what would have been used in barbershops or in the early days of hair removal. This is specifically a black-owned beauty brand that you can get at Target, but nowadays there are also disposable razors available, such as this one from Billy. But you see, these disposable razors, especially these that are marketed towards women, really didn't happen until, as mentioned, the post-war era. You see, when a lot of soldiers were off at war during World War I and World War II, Gillette couldn't sell their razors to the men because they were gone. So they started marketing to women, telling them that it was feminine to remove body hair, and really using this as a form of fear-based marketing to tell women that our body hair is unnatural or unnormal, when before that it was seldom removed. Well, now come the days of disposable razors, the ones that cost way too much, that there are a pink tax for, and that just dull too quickly. There are some that have multiple blades, although you still can get some of the reusable ones, which are much better for the environment and for your wallet. I'm just afraid to use these. Like, I don't trust my dexterity this much yet. But when it comes to shaving, how does it relate to our grass analogy? I want you to think of shaving your hair with a razor, kind of like using a lawnmower to cut the grass. When you use a lawnmower, you cut the grass evenly. You're kind of bringing it down to the nub, down to the ground, or in the case of our hair, you're kind of removing these hairs down to the skin. And if you've ever mowed lawn, you know that it can kind of leave a jagged edge. Well, same thing with shaving. Unfortunately, when these hairs are cut by a razor or by a blade, they can actually leave kind of a sharp edge, which if you have really curly hair or if you have ingrown hairs, can actually grow back into the skin and be really painful. But shaving is one of the most cost-effective and easiest things to do. Most people can manage this very easily at home. And if you find a razor or a brand that you really like, again, Bevel is Black owned and Billy really promotes body positivity, there are a lot of options that are easily accessible to remove the hair. Now, unfortunately, it does grow back within a couple of days, and that's where we get into waxing. Now, how is hard wax or strip wax or sugaring different? Well, hard wax, strip wax, and sugaring are all basically these sticky substances that are laid across the skin, and the hair is literally ripped out. Yes, that's right, you got the sticky stuff and you rip it off like a bad band-aid or a bad sticker. Strip wax is usually much faster because it happens in large sheets, whereas hard wax is usually better for areas like the axillary area or the groin and bikini line. And yes, this is a little piece of hard wax from my armpit. Now, while waxing is thought of a newer phenomenon than shaving, it actually also originated with the ancient Egyptians. They would mix things like wax and honey or sugar and apply it to the skin to remove the hair. But the true birth of waxing, especially in the modern sense, really happened in the 1960s. So after the post-war era, after Gillette was trying to sell their razors to everyone and shove them down our throats, hopefully not literally, because that would be very painful and very dangerous. Do not eat your shaving razors, kids. Waxing joined the scene, and it really followed the desire that women now had to remove their body hair, but also the fashion industry in innovating and doing things new. Now, the difference with waxing is that it can be much more dangerous. As you can imagine, if you're applying tacky, sticky things to the skin and ripping it off, yeah, you can rip the skin. And wax, in order for it to be liquid, needs to be hot. Then it has to cool down on the skin in order for you to rip it off. This can be extremely dangerous to do at home, and although I have done it at home because I am an esthetician, it's not something I recommend to everyone. Now, there are at-home wax kits that, as long as you're patch testing and making sure are at a decent temperature, they're totally safe and okay to use. Whereas usually waxing is done by a licensed esthetician or a licensed cosmetologist, and you can get this done in a beauty salon, in a beauty studio, sometimes even at nail salons, etc. But how is waxing different than shaving? Yes, it's ripping things out, but doesn't that hurt? Yeah, waxing hurts a lot more than shaving, and there are some techniques to make waxing less painful. As someone who has been waxing people for... Have I been waxing people for 13 years now? That is terrible. Fun fact, the reason that I don't do waxing professionally on others is because when I was in aesthetic school in 2009, I ripped off someone's eyebrow, and I have never forgiven myself for that. Well, waxing can be very tricky, even in the hands of trained professionals, and yes, it can be painful. Now, there are some techniques to make it less painful, such as pulling the skin taut or applying pressure, but if you want a video on that and about my waxing disasters, we can speak about them. The most important thing is the angle at which the wax is ripped off, because again, we're literally trying to quickly rip hairs out of the skin, which means we're getting them from the bottom here. Now, if we take this back to our lawn analogy, imagine shoving your hand into the ground and just pulling out a clump of grass, roots and all. That's basically what we're doing here. We are pulling out the root of the hair, getting it from the bottom and removing it from the skin. Now, as you can imagine, if we're removing the hair from where it's growing, from the root, from the very bottom, it'll take a lot more time for that hair to grow back and to protrude through the skin versus if we're just shaving something at the surface level that just takes a little while to grow back. And that's why shaving normally needs to be done like once a day if you want to completely avoid stubble, whereas waxing can be done every 4 or so weeks. Problem is, with waxing, you need to let that hair grow back until it's long enough to, you know, let the wax stick to it and get it ripped off again. And especially if you do have very thick, coarse hair, such as a man's beard, waxing can cause a lot of bleeding and pain and discomfort. So it's not right for everyone, although it does have its place. So now we know about mowing the lawn. We know about shoving our hands into the dirt and ripping the lawn out in clumps. What happens if we pour pesticides on the lawn? Like, we just want to zap it. We just want to kill it. Well, that's what at-home IPL does. Now, the reason I don't say laser is because at-home laser isn't and shouldn't be done. There's no reason that somebody should have a laser in their house unless you're like physicist? I don't know. Lasers are very different from IPL, otherwise known as intense pulsed light. And while you can get laser, IPL, and even things like electrolysis done in clinic, at home there are new IPL devices that really have surged in the last 10 to 15 years when it comes to at-home hair removal. IPL was first created in 1997 when researchers and scientists actually tested IPL, or intense pulsed light, on different hair lengths, different coarseness of hair, and different skin tones and colors. Now, IPL works by seeking out contrast in skin. The ideal candidate is somebody who has coarse hair that creates a contrast on the skin. So for example, this diagram that has very dark hair over a lighter skin tone. Now you can use IPL on all skin tones, but unfortunately if you have very, very light hair and very light skin, there's no contrast for the light to target, and it probably won't work very well. Same with if you have very dark hair and black ebony skin. If there's not a lot of contrast, the IPL might not be the best for you. Now there are things like alexandrite lasers or electrolysis, which are available in clinic, but for at-home use, IPL was really the only option, and the FDA did take a look at those studies and say yes, IPL is safe for at-home use for long hair, stable hair removal, and reduction. IPL has been found to be less effective than laser hair removal. You normally need to do laser hair removal a few times, but IPL, even if it's done in clinic, you need to do it a little bit more. But there are at-home devices so that if you don't want to continually book sessions in a clinic, you can do this at home. Now the problem with IPL versus shaving and waxing is that it usually is much more expensive. I've personally used the Kenzie. I tried that for over 2 years on one leg. I'm now using the YouLike. I'm using this on one armpit, and I'm going to try to test a year or more of this as well. And while I've seen good results, there are definitely some hiccups, and it's definitely more difficult to commit to, especially because you do have to shave during or in between IPL treatments. And the way this works is by shooting intense pulsed light into the skin. And basically this light concentrates around the hair and it zaps that little papilla, the little roots that are growing. So if we look at our lawn analogy, it's kind of like pouring pesticides all over the lawn and lighting it on fire and saying, hey, you can't grow here anymore. That is essentially what IPL is doing as it shoots light into the skin. Now, depending on the IPL device, some are more or less painful. My Kenzie has never burned me, but some people have gotten burns from at-home IPL devices. I've seen that professionally, and I've also seen that happen online. This YouLike one is a sapphire technology, which is cooling. I do find this to be more comfortable than the Kenzie. However, it is a little bit heavier, it is a little bit bigger. And if you actually want like a side-by-side comparison of my experience with the Kenzie versus the YouLike, happy to do that. Now, it appears that there are also many other options that I didn't even know were available. Something like rose skin that also looks a lot like the Kenzie. I need to look into this a bit more, but the fact of the matter is that most of these devices are $300 plus. And whether or not it's right for you really depends on if your skin is right for it, if you can keep up with the treatments, and the cost, especially where these may be a better option if you don't want that hair removed permanently. Now, the good news is that IPL can also be used on the face and for vascular conditions, so depending on what other needs your skin has, IPL may be better. But then when it comes to shaving and waxing, if you have something like dry skin versus sensitive skin, some of these may be better too. The fact of the matter is that it's not all one size fits all, and if you would like a video on which hair removal technique is better for which person or which lifestyle or which budget, I am more than happy to put that together. But for all intents and purposes, you now understand the history of hair removal. You understand how the hair actually grows and how these different tools or devices or modalities of hair removal work. And if you're ever confused, just think of your skin like a lawn. You can mow it, you can grab clumps and rip it out, or you can throw pesticides on it. But either way, there are many different options that are available to you if you do choose to remove your body hair. On that note, I'm going to go shave my hairy armpits because it's been a little too long, and for someone who has a hard time, you know, keeping up with shaving all the time, it just takes so much time, okay? I'm gonna shoot some IPL into my pits. If you would like for me to share with you some of my waxing disasters or how to safely wax at home, that is something we can further discuss. But overall, remember to stay hydrated. Remember to reapply your SPF, especially because shaving and waxing are both technically forms of exfoliation. Think about it. Overall, remember to be beautiful both inside and out, and I cannot wait to see you in this next video where hopefully my armpits and my legs and my kneecaps are not quite as hairy. Love you guys. Bye.